Hello everyone, Mr. Isaacson here. Just dropping you a video to talk about my favourite book. Now, it's quite difficult coming up with my favourite book because, as you probably would understand, being an English teacher, I've read a lot of books, but I had a good think about it and I've came up to the conclusion that my favourite book is this one. It's a book called Crime and Punishment. And it's by a Russian writer called Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, Fyodor Dostoevsky, he was a writer, but he was a big thinker as well. And he thought about human psychology. He thought about how the mind works. He thought about morality. He thought about God and religion and where we get our ideas of what is right and what is wrong. And he wanted to lay his ideas out in a way that could test them. So he wrote Crime and Punishment. Now, Dostoevsky was a religious guy, and he believes that, God judges us and our morals come from the scripture. So instead of just saying that and outlining his argument, he created a narrative so we could really explore it. So our protagonist in the narrative is a guy called Raskolnikov, and he lives in St. Petersburg in Russia in the late 1800s, so he was written a long time ago. And this guy is a law student and he's suffering quite a lot. He's half starved. He's had to abandon his studies because he has no money to do it, and he has a lot of family trouble as well. So his sister is about to marry a really horrible guy who just has quite a lot of money, so she's about to marry this guy so she can help her family out. His mum's sick and she can't afford a doctor, and he's very miserable. He's very fed up. Now, he comes across this pawnbroker, so he comes across an old lady in the local area who will, in exchange for your most valuable items, she'll give you some money. And Raskolnikov is half starved and he's going mad, and he's just had enough. So he goes to the old lady, he hands over his last possession, which was his precious pocket watch, and he gets a few rubles for it. He should have got more for it, but this old lady, she's very mean. And he took the couple of rubles and he fed himself, got himself a bit of food and a drink at one of the local taverns, and he goes home and continues to meditate on his poor fortune and his sad existence. So he thinks to himself, do you know what, it's this old lady, this pawnbroker, all of her money is under a bed in a box. She doesn't spend it, she's mean to everybody. On top of that, she's got a sister who she beats up and abuses, and basically she treats her like a slave. So Raskolnikov comes to the conclusion that, do you know what is the loss to humanity if this horrible person disappears off the earth? He can't think of one. He can't think of a justifiable reason why he shouldn't go and murder this old woman and take the money that she has. And he rationalises this through, he would make lots of people's lives better with this money. He could get his mum a doctor, he could free his sister of this horrible relationship she's in, and he could continue his studies, and everyone's life could be better and no one will miss the old woman. So he goes ahead and he commits this terrible, terrible act. And not only that, it does go horribly wrong, and he ends up killing the old lady's sister too. And he escapes, just about. He nearly gets caught, but he escapes, and he doesn't even keep the money. He buries the money and never goes back to it. And from that point on, he's a completely different person. He unravels. He's a totally different mindset now to the guy who thought it would be a good idea in the first place. And I haven't really given you the plot spoilers because the main point of the narrative is for you, the reader, to get in the mind of the protagonist and understand what he's going through, how he changes, how he comes to redeem himself, arguably. Whether you think he was right in doing what he did, or was it justifiable, or was it completely a terrible act against God, which was Dostoevsky's question, really. Can you justify doing something terrible for the greater good? So give it a go. It's a difficult book to read, guys, I'm not going to lie. It's a high level book. It would have been even more high level if it was still in Russian, but it's been thankfully and helpfully translated into English. I'd really love someone to read it or listen to an audiobook version of it and come to me when we're back at school together and have a conversation about it, because literature, when it's at its best, it's better than any movie you could ever watch. When you watch a movie, you're experiencing it through your sense of sight and your sense of sound. It's a very two-dimensional world. Even if it's a fantastic cinema like the IMAX, it still doesn't come close to a fantastic narrative, because take Crime and Punishment, for example. You're in the shoes, you're in the brain of the protagonist. You experience what he experiences. You go through the pain, the suffering that he experiences. You go through the change that he goes through. And you can taste, you can smell, you can touch the world that he lives in. It takes you back in time and it asks some fundamental questions. So I'll leave that with you, and I will give you big house points if you manage to read it, and I'll speak to you again very soon.